Welcome to the Roar Mindset, Leading Through Chaos. I'm Peter Brandenburger, and I help leaders embrace chaos to turn disruption into an advantage. Each episode brings stories and strategies to help you stop fighting disruption, lead with clarity, and thrive in uncertain times. Today, I'm joined by Jen Lashua, a fractional CMO and executive brand strategist with 20 years of experience in technology, marketing, and communications. Jen previously led Intel's global social media team, and today she helps executives build personal brands that better reflect the level at which they're operating. A warning for those who have been happily ignoring LinkedIn like I once did. You may not like the reality Jen and I discuss. Whether you are paying attention to your personal brand or not, one idea we return to is that a leader's brand is how people see and experience their mindset. So for you, your brand is there, and it's how people are seeing and experiencing the mindset. So in this conversation, Jen and I explore why accomplished leaders so often undersell themselves, where humility ends and making yourself small begins, and why LinkedIn may be used to judge you before anyone ever picks up the phone. We also get into authentic voice in an AI-heavy world, humility, optimism, and playing big when you should be. You might be surprised how leaders can use running or biking to help their work. So stay tuned for that. And also at the end for my reflections and suggestions on putting this all into action. Enjoy. Welcome, Jen. Glad you are here today and looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Peter. Me too. I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah. So I asked people just the question about what matters most to you as a way of getting to know a little bit about who you are and what's on your mind these days. So what matters most to you?
Yeah. What matters most to me right now is managing change. And I know this is something that's really near and close to your heart because this is what you coach people on and what you help people through. For me, this has meant, I'm experienced in managing change within a corporate setting. I've done a lot of that, having spent a lot of my career, almost all of my career at large global companies. So there's always a change in the product roadmap or the leadership or the priorities. But it was a big change for me personally when I went out on my own and started consulting. I formed my own business. I formed two businesses actually within about a year's time. And that's been a big change for me. And, anybody who runs their own business knows that there's nobody else setting priorities. You're doing that by yourself and you're self-motivating, and everything you do every day, all day is really self-directed. And that's been a big change for me. And some days it comes naturally. Some days things just flow. Some days it's a little bit clunkier, but I've, gotten into a rhythm and working things out. But that's the change that I'm really working through personally. And so that's kind of constantly on my mind because it's been a big shift for me.
Yeah, that is a big shift. I experienced a big shift as well. Just your calendar, like the calendar being filled up by the corporate responsibilities and meetings and then, I need to not fill it up necessarily, but I need to manage it myself. Yeah, it's kind of a big change. I guess what have you enjoyed about the transition?
I mean, I love not having those corporate responsibilities of trainings and budget meetings and, all of the other things that used to kind of clog up my workflow. Love that. Of course, I love the flexibility of being on my own. And I really like the multitude of different people and different clients that I get to work with. I'm always solving different challenges. And I think that's really cool. I love jumping into a business that I don't know a lot about and learning about it and trying to help to guide the person or the company, the brand through their challenges. That's been really fun. So it's been fun to apply what I did at Intel in a totally new setting on very different products and different customers, different audiences. I really like that challenge.
Yeah, I do like that variety as well. Like every client has their different challenges, although there's some underlying potential common things that you can help them and support them on. So it's a different dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I think that's the cool part of doing I won't speak for your work, but the work that I do is you kind of learn the basics and you kind of understand the fundamentals of marketing. And the fundamentals are really, they are what they are, and they apply to many different settings and industries and products. And so I found that really cool that, you can take the fundamentals that worked in a huge enterprise like Intel and then scale those down to a very small business that's, got one or two employees and one or two or a handful of products, and it still works. And I found that to be kind of cool.
Yeah. I've been working for a little bit, about a year or so. Well, the company, there's 10 people. And I think one of the interesting things is 9 of the 10 of them are women. And so it's this founder startup that's doing really purposeful work. It's called Rugged Thread, and they fix outdoor gear. So it's really focused on the environmental and circularity. And it's just a totally different mindset than Intel. But there's some fundamentals that are, the same, doing strategy and doing objectives and key results and getting some of the structure I've learned from Intel and applying that to some smaller, different scenarios.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is about this personal brand and how you have helped people with their personal brand. Maybe define what a personal brand is for us, engineers who may not be aware of what a personal brand is.
Sure. Your personal brand is the way that people view you, whether you intend for them to or not. It's the way that people experience you and your name and who you are and what you represent. So if you're not intentionally curating your personal brand online, mostly we're talking about, online channels, although there's also an aspect of, kind of speakerships and in person too. But if you're not actively cultivating that, it's being created for you by what gets published, by what other people are saying about you, other people's experiences. So my job is to help people and brands create the brand that they want and to really do it intentionally. So with a lot of executives, they're operating at this really high level, but when you look for them online, what you see online doesn't match. It's kind of way down here. And it's not for lack of trying or, fumbling or not knowing what to do. In most cases, it's really just a lack of time. And I think a lack of confidence in being able to put their brand out there and put their accomplishments out there in a way that really elevates their presence to match the level that they're operating at. So that's what I've helped people with, whether their goals are to land a seat on a board or to change career paths or to find a new job, to find clients. It kind of doesn't matter what the goals are. I can work with that person to help to create that personal brand that is going to help them land the job, get the seat on the board, get what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I struggle with that. I agree. I didn't have the time. I don't think I have the confidence, but also I wasn't really motivated. Like for LinkedIn, I didn't even have really a profile until I decided to leave Intel and start a coaching business, which I know is way too late, but I wasn't even thinking about it. So it's maybe even being naive about the need to have it and have it established before you want to go do something as opposed to do it and then try to establish it.
Yes, and you're not the only one. There's a lot of people who are in exactly the same boat that you are, where they really just haven't bothered. They didn't see a need to do it or they didn't have the time. They didn't know the importance of it. And, whether it's on LinkedIn, which I think is pretty critical because that LinkedIn is, I feel like that reference check that happens on you before you even know it's happening. So before anybody takes a meeting or a phone call with someone, they go and look that person up on LinkedIn, and what they find there is going to sway their decision making on whether or not they're going to accept the meeting or the phone call or have an email exchange with that person. So to me, I feel like as a professional, LinkedIn is table stakes. You have to have a profile there. And then there's other places where you can have a profile or you can have a viewpoint. You might have a Substack or you might have a creative portfolio online with your work. There's many other ways that you can showcase your work. But I do think LinkedIn is pretty important as a baseline.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking about myself and what we've been talking about. I mean, this podcast is primarily for me generating business as opposed to I don't look at it from a brand perspective, but obviously it is part of my brand and what I'm trying to establish, I guess, is my brand. I feel like my brand is morphed quite a bit or continues to evolve is maybe a different way of putting it. And I guess how often is that?
I think that's not uncommon to morph and change your brand as you go. I think it's probably more common in a situation that's maybe outside of corporate. So if, you're an individual who's running a business or a consultancy and is, looking at different ways to help clients, I do think it's natural that your brand is going to morph as you understand what the market needs and what they're looking for and how you can help. So I've definitely seen that. I've also seen executives kind of personal brands change with time too, as they grow and they progress in their careers, and maybe they take a role that's in a different area of the organization, or maybe they change industries. So it's definitely not uncommon. You don't want to reinvent your personal brand once a year, but I think it makes sense maybe once a year to kind of look back and reflect and say, does where I was a year ago, am I still reflecting that in my online presence, or am I reflecting where I am now and, more importantly, where I want to go?
Yeah. And for leaders, and I guess I should state that my definition of leaders is like it's a mindset, not a position. So it's how you're leading yourself if you're maybe just an individual contributor or could be a CEO or VP or whatever executive. I guess what are some common things you see with leaders and how are they dealing with their brands?
Sure. I mean, something that I would recommend is go out there and find the leaders that you aspire to be like. Maybe I think it's important to be paying attention to those who are kind of at your level and then maybe one or two levels up. It's great to follow the CEOs and COOs and CFOs of major companies, but if you're not right now on the track to becoming one of those people, what you do is going to be different than what they do from a online brand perspective. So I think it's important to, find a couple of people that are maybe one or two levels up from you and see what they're doing, and then evaluate, where do I fit in this whole conversation? Where is the white space for me to have a perspective and a point of view? And how can I differentiate myself and my thinking from everything else that is out there? And so, kind of have that as a starting point. And then I would also look at those leaders who are the CXOs of big organizations and look at what they're publishing. Now, of course, they have a team of people who are doing that for them. It's very, very rare to find someone at that level who is actually doing it themselves. But what you can see there is the way that their communications team is positioning that leader in an environment like LinkedIn. And even though you might not have a comms team that's doing that for you, you can learn and you could take some of those lessons and apply them to your own work.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of those executives, and I look at their posts, and I'm like, I'm clearly this is not you. And I guess I kind of like that's kind of dishonest a little bit, or maybe it's not them, or maybe it's AI, is maybe a whole nother conversation we can have. But I think like, how do you make sure it's authentically you? And so when people meet you, there's no disconnect between maybe what you're publishing and who you are.
I mean, the people that I work with, because I ghostwrite posts for people, like I write their LinkedIn and come up with visuals to go along with their LinkedIn posts. And I usually really kind of push back if they're asking to say something that really isn't them, and kind of, say, is this really a perspective that you would take? Or what do you actually think about this? Or if you were explaining, I had somebody recently who just basically wanted to republish an announcement that their company had published, and the company had told their executives, this is important and you should go share it on LinkedIn. And so they asked me to help them share it on LinkedIn. And I said, but that's just recycling news. That's boring. Like, what is your perspective on this? What do you think about it? What are your experiences? And that was a whole different conversation. So that's, I guess, what I would say is I would hope that leaders aren't just out there kind of recycling corporate junk. I would hope that they are putting their own words to it and their own experiences and making it really personal. If the leader doesn't have time to actually craft that message, or maybe they kind of stumble over the words a little bit and need someone to help shape what that actually sounds like, I think that's totally fair. But I would say that having a point of view and sharing that as a leader is way more valuable than just kind of sharing news.
Yeah. Are people underrepresenting themselves? I know you and I talked a little bit about the fears that I had, even like my first website didn't have my picture on it as just an example. Like I didn't want to be seen, so to speak. And my business is ultimately selling me, which doesn't make sense now. But at the time, it's like, I think I had a lot of fear and reservation about really coming out with what I'm capable of. So I guess what's your experience in this, and what have you worked with people on it?
So I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and I've probably worked with about 50 executives over that time. And I have been very surprised at how much fear and self-doubt exists when it comes to portraying someone's actual capabilities and successes online. And there's a difference between being overly self-promotional and just being accurate and factual in your work. And when I speak with executives about being honest and sharing their successful leadership roles and their stories, I'm just surprised at how many might hesitate or kind of undersell themselves. When I started this work in executive social media, I thought my job would be more to help leaders shape their message and their personal brands. And what I've learned is that there's actually a lot of support and encouragement that comes along with it to help them get the courage to publicly take credit for their work.
Yeah. I guess, have you done this in the past yourself? Have you underrepresented yourself?
Yes. I'll share a story from very early in my career that I think exemplifies this. I was probably a year into my work at marketing at Intel, and I had worked on a major campaign. We were presenting the campaign to our CMO, who was probably, I don't know, one, two, three level. I was three levels down from her at the time, but we were making that presentation. I was invited to the meeting, which I was surprised and happy to be invited to. I walked into the room, and there's one of these huge boardroom tables in the middle of the room, oval shaped with a bunch of chairs, around the table. About three-quarters of those chairs were full. And then there's a bunch of chairs on the perimeter of the room, kind of pushed up against the edges. And so I kind of quietly came in, and I moved my way over, and I took one of the seats on the perimeter of the room. My boss's boss saw me do that, and she scooted her chair over at the main table, and she pointed to the space that was beside her, and she said, "Come take your seat at the table. You were invited to this meeting because you deserve to be here. Now come take your seat." And I did, and that has really stuck with me ever since. And whether it's a physical table, whether it's having a voice in a Zoom meeting that might be, dominated by other strong voices, or if it's conveying yourself accurately on a platform like LinkedIn, it can be hard to do for sure. And it takes courage. And sometimes it just takes a partner or someone who's familiar with your work to say, "No, you did that. Go take credit for it."
Yeah. What a great lesson. I mean, sounds like it's still sticking with you, and you deserve to be at that table, I assume, because of your knowledge of a specific issue as opposed to your hierarchy. You talked about, three levels or multi levels. I assume most of the people at the table were organizationally higher than you, but you had the knowledge of what was being discussed.
That's right. And I had contributed to it. I put a lot of work into that campaign. And I think what this woman had recognized was that, who were they to take credit for the work that this whole team had put in? And so that's why the team was invited to the meeting to participate and hear the feedback that was a direct reflection or response to their own work.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of a story. A friend of mine, a coach, her story about being at the table. I don't think I'll use her name because I don't think I have permission. But anyway, she used to come into meetings and physically take up space. Like she would bring in like multiple notepads just to create space because she was not always given the credit that you were given there. And so she asserted herself physically in the middle of the table and took up space so it wasn't squeezed in. It was a good story. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there other stories that you have that you can share that would help maybe leaders understand maybe some holes in their own brand?
One piece of advice that I think can be useful is many of us receive performance reviews at the end of the year, or we do self-evaluations at the end of the year. And I know I have a whole stack of them. I have a whole file folder full of them. And it can be really informative to look back on those performance reviews and see the projects that I've completed and the work that I've done and the accomplishments that I've had over time. And it's also great, Intel didn't always do this, but in many years we did 360 feedback, and you would actually get quotes from people who wrote specific things about working with you and what that was like to work with you. And you can find themes in those, and you can draw out words that characterize your work and your work ethic and your ability to lead and things like that. And then that can be something that you take and we use on a LinkedIn profile. It's nice to kind of read through those and reflect back, especially if they're positive, but you can also use AI to draw themes out. And then, it makes it a little bit easier for you to then kind of put those into your online profile. But I think that's a really nice way to think back about your work. I also had an experience recently where I helped someone, a leader who I had worked very closely with during my career at Intel. And this person was looking to change careers and do something different and really didn't have much of a LinkedIn profile to start with. And so we went through and I helped this person identify, what they had done, their positions, titles, accomplishments, all of that. We kind of co-wrote bits and pieces of it together. And then, after we had done that, I kind of looked back and kind of said, but wait a minute, you led this, didn't you? And they said, oh, yeah, I did. And I said, and this major accomplishment that, happened, this major piece of work that was delivered, wasn't that your team that did that? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, what about this, and this? Would those have ever happened if you weren't in the room? And they said, no. And I was kind of shocked at how much this person left out, intentionally or maybe unintentionally from their work. And so when I was able to call attention to it and say, no, these are really key pieces of your accomplishments, and let's include those and let's frame them like this. And I was able to do this because I knew that person's work very intimately. But I think that is something that can be done with a former colleague or, a previous manager, someone who's worked for you, to kind of, banter back and forth and, remember this, and then to kind of pull those and draw those experiences in. This person that I was working with was pretty reluctant to overstate. They didn't want to have a LinkedIn profile that felt like they were just chest feeding and taking more credit than they deserved. And felt that, and I, expressed this, that they deserved the credit for the work that we were talking about here. These were solid accomplishments and nothing was being overstated. And it was actually an omission by not including it on their LinkedIn page. But I guess kind of moral of that story was I was surprised at how difficult it was for this person to really take credit for the work that they had delivered.
Yeah. I like that question. Would this have happened without you or your team? And also the one I ask sometimes is, would it happen as fast or as soon? If you really made it happen and made it happen quickly and got it to market or got it to wherever the needed to be, that's pretty good.
That's right.
And one of my personal hesitations, maybe a question for you, is how do you balance recognizing it yourself as opposed to the team?
Yeah, I think that's a very common challenge, right? But I think that giving credit to your team, you can give credit to your team and still own your own success in a project or a program. A leader can say that we built this and the team built this, while also giving examples of, usually it's a specific judgment call that they gave, that they provided, that moved a project in a certain direction. So that's one example. Another is most work progresses via relationships, right? And so if someone holds those relationships and nurtures those and is able to present the information in a way that convinces the CFO or the CMO to take the point of view that this team has put forth, that's something that a leader can definitely take credit for. But I also think it's really nuanced in the language and in the way that you present it. And I think there's really a way to present it in a way that acknowledges that your team did the work and you guided the work or you led the work.
Yeah. I just realized when you're saying that, probably one of my challenges is for many years I was working with customers. And so we would always give them credit, on purpose. Like we wanted to bolster them from a relationship and a partnership perspective. So he's always giving them a lot of the credit. So I'm wondering if that I'm continuing to like bring that in. Just a thought of mine.
Yes, and I think there's different places where you give credit differently. So if it's in a keynote or a presentation of technology where the partner's presence, really bolsters that announcement or that presentation, I think that's a great place to, kind of give more of the credit or, have it be more shared. But if we're talking about your portfolio or your LinkedIn page, in that case, I think it's absolutely reasonable for you to take the credit for the work that you led with the partner, of course. But, again, would the work have happened if you hadn't led that program?
Yeah. And I guess what's the distinction between, accurately branding yourself and like humility? Like where does humility sit in this whole thing?
Yeah, I think that's a really personal call. And I think different people are comfortable with different messages. Some people are really comfortable with a lot of promotion and others really aren't, and they kind of bury it a little bit. I also think it depends on what your objectives are. If you're on the hunt for new clients, then you might have to kind of put that humility to the side a little bit and be a little bit more overt about what you're offering and what you bring and your unique value proposition. I think it's a personal decision.
Mm,
Yeah.
kind of what feels right
Yeah, what feels right to
or
you.
what is needed, maybe even to your point of getting customers or whatever the situation you're in.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, another great way to approach it is just to, write something and then ask a few people who know you. Does this sound like me? Does this sound like too much? Is this overly promotional? And if you pick the right people, they'll give you some, pretty honest feedback. And I think that's a really good way to start.
I like that. Yeah, it's actually kind of brings up something that I do a lot of work using some of the assessments out there, like Enneagram or Leadership Circle Profile and some others, which are all helping people identify their strengths and weaknesses and who they are and their motivations and behaviors behind them. Are you familiar with those? And I guess how do those serve into a brand? Because it is who you fundamentally are. At least I believe it's a big part of who you are and how you show up in the world. And therefore, it kind of helps develop your superpowers. And to me, that's kind of your core brand. Is that part of your brand? Does it influence it?
I mean, I think certainly it would influence how that brand comes across and how your personal brand feels. And I
Yeah.
think in some cases, people may skew on one side of things than the other. So I don't know if kind of putting yourself squarely within one box is always a good way to go. But I do think it definitely influences what you publish and how you promote yourself. And there shouldn't be a difference, right? So when someone meets you, they should feel like they're meeting the same person that they're seeing online. So we do want to make sure that there's consistency there.
Yeah. And I guess on consistency and authenticity as well, how do you look at how AI is being used in creating people's brands? How do you think this is all going to go?
Gosh, this is such a hot topic right now. This is filling my LinkedIn feed every single day about who's using AI and how they're using it. And I mean, so I've done a little bit of my own research on this and, kind of asked people if you can tell that something in your LinkedIn feed has been written by AI, but it still has an interesting message or lesson. Do you think less of the person who posted it? Do you not really care as long as the information is accurate? These were kind of a couple of different options that I gave people. And what most people said was, I don't mind as long as the information is accurate and there's some kind of learning there and it doesn't sound like garbage, basically. So that's that piece. That's kind of what people said. I've also been in conversations where someone has created a tool to replicate their voice. And they kind of put in, here's the trends that I'm interested in. Here's what I want to talk about. Write me something that, talks about ABC. And what it spits out is, effectively then what they put into LinkedIn. That I feel like is pretty dangerous. And I would not do that because it's just not authentically you. Maybe the message is there, but if AI wrote the entire thing, then I'm not like what I want. If I'm following you, Peter, I want what's in your brain. And I don't care if what you're publishing isn't absolutely 100% perfection. I just want access to your brain. That's why I'm following you. So I think there's some gray lines. I mean, I also think that there's ways that AI can really help you express an idea or help to make a point, or I use it a lot to argue with me. So I say, this is my point of view, find the holes. And that can be really useful. But I think that, kind of using it to just completely write something and then claim that it's your own, that I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things. One is arguing with myself. I've created I think 4 or 5 personas of target clients. And I always ask them like, hey, how would the 5 personas think about it? And that's been an interesting perspective. And I don't know how well AI is doing it, but it always makes me think of like, how would they interpret what I'm putting out? And when I try to post it, I want it to be me. And it's not perfect because, I mean, I'm an engineer. My ability of English and grammar is not great. And if AI changes it, like people are going to know this was cleaned up by something that's not Peter. And
Right.
that's because it's not how I speak either. And so I think the style to me matters as well because it's how I would write an email if I just was writing you an email right now and not using ChatGPT.
Yeah,
But I do
absolutely.
like coming up with the ideas and getting them like going.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that it can be really useful, or the ways that I'm using it is either right up front to help me ideate when I kind of say, I have a thought, let's kind of ideate around this thought and help me come up with some different, perspectives or points of view or things I should think about. And then it'll help me with that. And then I go and write. I do the writing. Or sometimes I feel like I have a really great point of view and I will just either write or voice dictate whatever's in my head. And it's kind of this jumbled mess, but it's whatever's in my head right now. And I know that it's too long for LinkedIn and I know that it's not well structured and, all of that. And then I might say, and I typically use Claude, and I'll say to Claude, this is what I've wrote. Tell me what's not resonating here or what's not landing or how I can improve. And let's work through this and improve it together. And so we kind of have a conversation, and sometimes it'll say, well, you made the same point in paragraph 1 that you made in paragraph 3, and you don't need to replicate that. It's like, oh yeah, I sure did. And then I can go back and, make those fixes. So I see it being useful in many ways, but that's kind of 2 different ways that I would use it. So not from start to finish, but either for kind of the ideation or to help me polish something that I've already written.
Yeah. That's very close to what I do too. Yeah. Like an editor and like helping with concise. That's another piece because I feel like it's my duty to make it as concise as possible for people because they're busy, especially my target clients, right? So they're all very, busy. They don't have a lot of time to read something from me.
Very smart.
Yeah. What have you noticed from people that is authentic, but maybe not the best for them or can get in their way?
Sure. I think there are some pieces of people's personalities that are wonderful as part of their individual personality and also maybe a great way to lead a team or an organization. But when those come out too much on a platform like LinkedIn, it can be a detriment. So the example that I'll give here is a leader that I was working with who very much, we were talking earlier about sharing credit with the team who did the work and making sure that you're not taking credit. And this person very, very much over indexes on giving credit to the team and not taking enough credit for themselves and being appreciative and thankful of the work that has been done. And the way that this manifested in what we were doing together is in their posts before we started working together, this person used words like appreciate, grateful for, thanks to, a lot of words that express appreciation and thanks. And what this was doing inadvertently was bringing their leadership stature actually down a bit by saying things like grateful to have been included in conference or appreciate the opportunity to sit on a panel with so and so and so and so. Whereas to flip that, this client that I was working with, they were the ones bringing benefit to that conference or to that panel. And it was everyone else who should have been appreciative that they were there sharing their views and their time with the audience. And that subtle shift in language by not using so many words like that really helps to elevate a leader and assert their presence and really give them the credit that they deserve.
So if I get this right, I mean, you can do the gratitude, but just don't overdo it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think a great way to do that is, and this is probably what people want to hear more of anyway. If you've been at a conference or you've spoken somewhere or you've attended an event, your followers want to know what you learned at that event that they didn't get a chance to learn because they weren't there. So share that first. Share the learnings, share the key takeaways, something really important that, resonated with you. At the end, if you kind of want to say, appreciate the invitation or appreciated the opportunity to spend time together, something like that. I think that's a very nice way to close things off, but it's also not necessary. As a leader and as a subject matter expert, you earned your place there and you were invited because of your expertise. So again, it's taking credit for that and understanding and knowing and holding your value and not being afraid to assert yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would always thank the people, but I get your point, is recognize that and be grateful. It's a humility leadership because to me, I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Collins and his Good to Great book, but he talks about being a level 5 leader, and it's one of humility. I guess your point is we shouldn't overdo that.
That's right. You don't want to kind of over index. And, on this example that I was mentioning, I did some studies of this person's post over, I think it was about a year's time, and looked for patterns in the words. And the word gratitude was by far and away the top word that was used in their posts, or grateful. And so when you see it like that, and when you see it in the data, you start to realize, oh, wow, maybe I am kind of over indexing there. And maybe I need to shift my language just a little bit. I'm not saying at all, don't be appreciative, but I think there's, kind of ways to do that in your writing that offer credit to maybe the other people that were on the panel with you or, other people that were in the room that contributed to the conversation, but just ways to do that while you're also taking up the space that you deserve for what you brought to the conversation.
Yeah. As leaders are listening to this, are there some quick steps you would want them to do to just figure it out? I mean, I guess to me, the first one is, do you even have a LinkedIn presence and brand, and are you focusing on it? But I guess, is there something else just to even notice what they may be missing and then maybe some steps that they would take?
Sure. I mean, I think that if people aren't on LinkedIn today, it's probably either because they don't want to or they don't have the time to do it. And regardless of the situation, I would still go back to, if you're a professional, LinkedIn is table stakes, and love it or hate it, that's what it is. And, like I mentioned before, this invisible reference check is happening on you before somebody agrees to take a meeting with you. So you at least want to make your LinkedIn, you want to have a LinkedIn. You want to make sure that you have a photo that actually looks like you and that you have a background image. Don't leave that plain blue thing with the circles up there in the background. Give it a background image. And then, write an about section, list your accomplishments. You don't have to post all the time. I think going in and posting ideally at least once a month would be great if you can manage that. But if you're not in the habit of using LinkedIn right now, at least just start using it and get in there and comment and like other people's content. But what you don't want is, let's say you're someone who is a real subject matter expert in your area and you're building that expertise. And then, a year or 2 years from now, you're trying to secure speaking opportunities at conferences. And someone's going to go back to your LinkedIn and they're going to look at what have you published over the past year or two on your LinkedIn. And if they find nothing, if you've been quiet, and they're kind of wondering, what have you been doing? And do you really know what you're talking about? And do they really want to invite you to their conference? So that's why I think that kind of regular cadence is important to maintain.
Yeah, been doing it before you need it. Like in my case, I guess I just call out to leaders. Like you may not think you need it, but you might.
That
Yeah.
is wrong.
It's also, I mean, the other thing that came up is like you're missing a gift to being able to give out. I mean, it's, there's the mechanism of LinkedIn and the algorithm and all that kind of fun stuff. But the other piece is you are bringing something unique to this world and hiding it yourself. Like that's not good. Like give the gift that you have to others because you probably have some interesting perspective that can actually help people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that in our own little circles, I was talking with someone about this the other day. In your own little circle, you think that, "Oh, I've had this conversation 10 times this week. This is such a common topic. Everybody's talking about this. What am I going to bring to the table that's, unique and differentiated?" But if you come up like a level or two, you realize that actually not everybody is talking about this. And the people that are talking about it, you and your 10 closest colleagues, are really experts in that area. And if it's something that there's interest in at a broader scope, then publish your point of view, publish your perspective or your thoughts. Or even if you don't have a definitive point of view, talk about what you're thinking through and some of the different sides of an argument or kind of the pros and the cons. Not each post has to be, a dissertation or a lesson.
Right. And it doesn't always have to be written. You can do videos. I mean, you don't have to do a full podcast, but you can do little just short videos when you're walking in nature or whatever you want to do. And it could be a different mechanism to trying it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. I think video comes across really well and it gives people a really nice way of getting to know you. Some people who are maybe a little bit hesitant on video, another way to do that is to produce graphics, to put graphics up there. So you don't even, if someone doesn't really want to kind of show their face very often. I know some people are a little more shy in that way. You can produce graphics that explain your points of view in a really visual way, but you don't actually have to get on camera.
Yeah. I'm doing some short videos and obviously doing podcasts. And I did have some fear. I had some scary. And then you just start doing it. It's like, yeah, I mean, the world is not going to change when you release your first video.
Right.
And when you start something like doing videos, your expectation of quality is up here, but you're here. And the only way you're going to close that is by doing it. And so you need to continue to do it. And, like when I started podcasts, one of the great advices I got is go, take your top 3 podcasts and go back and listen to their first episodes, like their 1, 2, and 3 and where they are today. And they are, I mean, and the people I listen to have huge production teams, acting experience, like all this other stuff. And it's still night and day compared to where they started and where they are now. So it's an interesting technique to kind of show that growth, even in people who you wouldn't expect. Yeah.
So true. So true.
To get it out there.
Yeah.
So whether it's writing or posting, or get it good enough quality and then keep trying to get it better.
Yeah, that's right. Or I mean, with video, you can also film a whole bunch of video and never release it. Just going through the act of putting yourself on camera and getting comfortable with it, that's a step forward and that's a learning in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Out of my personal experience. Okay, as we wrap up today, a couple of questions. I guess one is I know you're a runner. So what are leadership lessons you've learned from being a runner?
Ooh, leadership lessons. Well, one way that I love to use running is I can work through a lot of really good problems and challenges while I'm running. Somehow my brain's just like working differently. And, whether it's like how to position something to a boss or a client, or there have been, different kind of personnel challenges that I've had at work and, kind of how to address those. But like, I take these big challenges and I almost like slot it into my mind before the run. And I kind of say to myself, okay, we're going to work on this. And then I do that, kind of try to work through that challenge while I'm running. So that works kind of well.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the same experience with like mountain biking is getting out and get a different perspective. It's interesting for me, maybe this is for you, but the first part of the ride is usually just like mind numbness for me. Like I'm just kind of disconnecting. And the middle section is where I'm like, this is all the creativity. And then what I struggle with in the end is like trying to remember all this creativity by the time I'm done with my ride. So it's like, it's not gone, but I do love that like experience of just disconnecting. And then for some reason, that disconnection after that, it's just like, oh, all these things start flowing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of like some people say that they get these brilliant ideas when they're in the shower. I think it's kind of the same thing. Your mind is like relaxed and you're kind of almost in this Zen state where you're able to think about things at a different level than how you think about them when you're sitting at a desk in front of a computer.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a bunch of research on this that talks about when you're deep into a topic, like Cal Newport talks about it, for example, and when you're deep into a topic, and you do it for like 45 minutes or something like at a computer, getting and changing, but you're still thinking about it and your brain's still integrating some stuff. So those changes happen because your brain allows you to integrate because you're not as focused on the task of, let's just say it's writing. And if you're writing something that's different, obviously skill set than just thinking about it when you're running. And so like being able to be different allows that integration to happen. So it's actually things that we're learning more about in the world of our brain.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. All right. What's the one leadership lesson that you continue to learn over and over again?
Ooh, boy. I mean, I would have to go back to where we started, which is change and being able to deal with change. And I knew what that felt like in a corporate setting. And then coming out of the corporate setting and working for myself, it's a whole different set of changes. And, every day is different and being able to adapt and, accommodate the different things that are happening. It's constant. Being able to keep up. It's a constant challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Change is constant.
Yeah.
It is continues to happen. And we're always going to go through transitions and disruptions and things that require, change. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, now, we kind of went through this, AI is going to take over the world and AI is going to take everyone's jobs. And then AI is too expensive. And now, does it really hold the promise that people said that it was going to? And it's been, kind of this ride, really, that's just been in the past 12 months or so. So, simply keeping up with all of that is a lot.
Yeah. It's going to continue to evolve. And what's the one word that sums up your leadership mindset these days?
I think optimism.
Hmm.
And
Say
that's
more.
something that doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes I accidentally slip into, oh, this was a terrible day or that was a bad experience. But if I bring that to the forefront and try to find the positive and try to find the learnings and really kind of focus on what went well or what I can take from something rather than what an experience took from me, then I'm always better at the end.
I love that optimism. All right. If people want to contact you or get a hold of you to work with you or just to see what you're up to, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Sure, we'll reach out on LinkedIn. I'm on there every day, and my LinkedIn profile has my email address or send me a DM. But happy to work with folks. I'm also always happy to do a complimentary 20-minute consultation. So, you don't have to worry about making a big investment or, would I be the right person to work with? Happy to have a chat. So,
Great. Yeah, I'll post your LinkedIn in the notes. Well, thank you for coming on today. It's been a great conversation, and I feel like I have a lot of work on my LinkedIn profile already.
well, thanks, Peter, for having me. It's been so great talking to you and really great getting to know you over the past couple of months too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
3 things stood out to me with my conversation with Jen. First is taking your seat at the table. I often hear leaders say they have not been given the opportunity, visibility, or access they deserve. Sometimes this is absolutely true, and there's some systemic things that cause this. But Jen's story made me wonder what might change if I also ask ourselves, what is one thing I can do to move closer to that proverbial table? Reflect on one action and go do it. Can be small. Second, leaders should share their interpretation, not simply repeat and summarize information. Your team can read announcements, reports, pass downs, and company updates themselves. Jen made this point about LinkedIn, but it also applies as much to how you communicate with your team. You may interpret the information with your management, but not taking the time to do that with your team. This could include leadership pass downs, business updates, changes in strategy, or industry trends. And help them answer 2 questions. What does this mean? And why does it matter? You're busy, so you don't need to interpret everything. Choose one that's most pressing or on top of your mind and start there. Third is helping answer the question about what is your leadership brand. The first is, I think it already exists. And it exists because I think it already exists. And it exists through how you lead and interact with others. I recently used 2 practices to better understand mine. The first one is I created a table of all the major programs and initiatives I had led. Beyond summarizing each one, I reflected on these questions. How well did it go? And this reminded me that not everything I led was successful and helped me consider how I view those experiences now. What did I contribute to solving the problem or capturing the opportunity? This makes it important about what I captured, not what the we of this or the team actually did. So it brings out your contributions. And then what does this experience reveal about my leadership? What did I do to help the team? The second one I did to help understand my brand is I've been asking people how they experience my leadership. This is kind of a 360 or a feedback process. And their response helped me see strengths I may overlook, as well as gaps between how I intend to show up and how others actually experience me. So your brand is not just a LinkedIn profile. It's how you show up every day. I believe a leader's brand is how people see and experience their leadership mindset. So go cultivate your own Roar mindset. Thanks for listening to Roar Mindset, Leading Through Chaos. Disruption isn't going away, but you can embrace it and turn it into an advantage. Until next time, stop fighting disruption, lead with clarity, and thrive in uncertain times.